Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. And while the Phils didn't win their series with the Mariners in Seattle, was yesterday a sign that the baseball gods are finally back on their side? We'll discuss on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for checking us out. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space, 5 years over at 97.5 The Fanatic on the radio here in Philadelphia. I've been 3 years a credentialed media member of the Philadelphia Phillies and 3 years your host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb, and you can use code, it's all in lowercase, lockedonmlb, and you'll get a first deposit match up to $100. So the Phils were in Seattle over the weekend. They head to LA. We're going to talk about the series with the Dodgers coming up, but the struggles continued for two of the games in Seattle. And honestly, that whole saying, right, it's always darkest before the dawn, it definitely felt like it was darkest over the first two games in Seattle. Tyler Phillips made the start in game one and got absolutely shelled, just like jumped on in the second inning. And it was over from Jump Street. And it was one of those like, if I was not doing this podcast and watching every game, that would have been a turn the game off in the second inning type of night. It was just flat out miserable. Phillies didn't do anything offensively. The pitching wasn't good enough from Tyler Phillips. And I'm not going to rip the kid. He literally just threw a complete game shutout to start before that. So he's a young pitcher. He's going to have growing pains. It just sucks that you didn't give them a chance to win that night. And I'm not trying to say, the Phillies are fine despite getting shelled by the Mariners. Like, it's just kind of, it is what it is at this point. And then Saturday was even worse. They blew a 5-run lead. They lost in extras again. I'm like, man, if that's not the game that they're going to win, how in the world are they going to win a game? That was my honest thought coming out of that game on Saturday. Like when that got done late Saturday night, the only thing in my head was, if they're not going to win that ball game, how are they going to win a game? Like, will they ever win a game again? I know that's not like a rational thought to have, but I wasn't thinking rationally. I don't think a lot of fans have been thinking rationally throughout this stretch of really rough performances by the Philadelphia Phillies. Lost 6 straight series, 7 straight series. It's hard to even keep track at this point. Multi-game losing streak, the longest of the season, on the verge of being swept by the Mariners after being swept for the first time all year in a home series against the Yankees before heading out west. Things were bleak. And then yesterday happened. And while there were great performances on the field, and we're going to talk about yesterday, like I'm tired of talking about the losses. So forgive me if I want to focus on the win. But it's also the thing freshest in my mind. And I'm trying to figure out if I'm in some type of like Twilight Zone mindset with the Philadelphia Phillies, like everything's happening so weird that I'm looking for a crazier explanation than what it is. I'll give you the simple baseball explanation. You had a pitcher go out in Zach Wheeler and absolutely dominate a lesser team that has not been good offensively this year. Zach Wheeler went out and gave you 8 strong shutout innings. He was unbelievable last night, or yesterday evening, I should say, against the Seattle Mariners in a time where the Philadelphia Phillies really needed them to be. A shutout win. Now, unfortunately, Wheeler was not able to finish it due to pitch count, but like I said, 8 innings, the final line, 2 hits allowed, no runs, obviously, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts, like dominant. 96 pitches, probably could have gone back out there for the 9th, but with with what happened in the 8th inning, there was no real reason for him to. Because you got yourself a big enough lead thanks to what we're going to talk about next. I mean, the Phils were up 1-0 for most of that game. So don't make that 6-0 score seem like, Wheeler cruised and the offense really helped them out and there was no worries. Like, that was a game where it was like, we may be in trouble here if something doesn't go our way offensively. You needed more extending runs and they just weren't coming. The realistic explanation is your big players hit. I mean, I'll tell you the stat lines now before we get into how they got there. But Kyle Schwarber, 3 for 5, leadoff home run. Bryce Harper, 3 for 4, home run. Alec Boehm, home run. Bryce Stott, home run. Like, you got some production, some pop. The top of the order was much better. You got 6 hits between Harper and Schwarber, so 2 of your top 3 spots in the lineup were productive, and you got a great pitching performance. That's the logical explanation. You guys ready for the illogical explanation? Because I saw what you saw, and it was a play in the bottom of the 7th inning. Zach Wheeler getting near the end of his rope. The balls are starting to get hit a little bit harder. And Seattle is one of those ballparks. I heard them talking about it on one of the radio broadcasts about the sight lines and how easy it is to see for fielders and hitters. And it seemed like there were a lot of balls that were just not seen very well in that series. Well, not really in the series, maybe like in early parts of the first 2 games, but specifically in the day game on Sunday, yesterday. And Brandon Marsh had one of those in center field. There's a ball hit to center field, kind of straight away. Didn't look like it was too complicated. And Marsh gets back close to the fence. And the whole time, when you're watching it develop in real time, you can tell from Jump Street he doesn't see it. You always know when an outfielder doesn't see it, because either you're going to get the full hands up in the air, can't see it, trying to alert the other outfielders that they have no idea where the ball is. Or if you're kind of tracking it and you lose it, you'll see kind of a half, like, I don't know, and a little bit of a flinch out of the way to try and avoid wearing a baseball to the face. It's a scary feeling when you lose one and you know it's headed pretty close to you. So that's what we got from Brandon Marsh. But instead of completely flinching, he did something miraculous. He just stuck his glove out in the air, sort of like Smalls and Sandlot. And by the grace of the baseball gods, the ball just hit his glove. Like, it just went into his glove without him even seeing it. Didn't see it remotely, hit the leather. He instinctually snapped the glove shut, and then he kind of threw his hands up like, I don't even know how that just happened. He did point to the sky after that, and that was one of those moments where it's like, oh my God, I don't know how that's even possible to happen. Like, there's behind the back plays by like pitchers, maybe is like the only other clean blind play in baseball that you see, but I don't know that I've ever seen this. I think back to, like, there's an old sports clip of a Canadian Football League player. Maybe this is a deep cut. I'm a sports nut. Maybe you know it. But he's like running a slant over the middle of the field, and he hasn't turned his head back to the quarterback, and the ball just like hits him in the arm as he's running and just sticks there, and he catches it. Like, I've seen it there, and that may be the only other time I've seen someone catch a ball completely blind where they didn't see it. Brandon Marsh just no-looked a deep fly ball to center field. And that felt like a moment, right? Maybe we're grasping at straws. It's very possible that the insanity that has set in from watching a team that looks so good for such a large stretch of the season go through a stretch like this, it could lead you to, like I said, the twilight zone. So that's why I gave you the logical stuff first about, hey, you got good pitching, you got good hitting. That's kind of the name of the game in baseball, and that would be the more logical explanation. But something else happened. When Brandon Marsh made that play, it felt like every break that had gone against the Phillies, like over this losing streak, over this stretch of bad series, while the Phillies have not been playing good baseball and they don't have anyone to blame but themselves, you can point a finger somewhat towards the baseball gods. Yes, I believe they're a real thing. Yes, I believe they exist in all sports. There is some higher power of some sort that governs the sports worlds and sports specifically, and they determine good hops or bad hops, hard hit balls at somebody or not at somebody. It's a game where the margin for error is so minimal. A degree here, a degree there is a hit, a home run, an out. It could be any of this thing, a strikeout. And the Phillies couldn't buy a break for a while now. That felt like all of the karma coming back when Brandon Marsh caught that ball. And in and of itself, that's not quite enough. It may just be like a lucky catch. It may just 1 in a million. Who knows? But that's not a sign of anything like a deity, a higher power, is it? The baseball gods. What happened next? Well, it's hard not to think about it because that was the bottom of the 7th. And Zach Wheeler works out of that inning. And then the top of the 8th, we saw things that we have not seen for what feels like years. Realistically, it's been weeks. But right after that one, after not being able to score consistently in game 1, game 2, earlier in game 3, the series against the Yankees. Like, the Phillies have had trouble with consistent offense for a while. The 8th inning then saw Bryson Stott homer. That's a rarity this year. Bryce Harper finally put a swing on a ball that looked great. He had 3 hits, but this one was the exclamation mark that coming out of it, the absolute bomb to right center, 391 feet to make it 4-0. The second home run of the inning. Then Alec Boehm goes back-to-back with Bryce Harper, makes it 5-0. Then JT Realmuto has an RBI single later in the inning as the Philadelphia Phillies end up scoring 5 runs on 3 home runs in the 8th inning in a big spot in that game after that miracle catch. You're going to call that a coincidence? You probably should, but I'm not feeling logical right now. I like to believe in it's the line from Moneyball, right? How can you not be romantic about baseball? You know what? A good romantic that does, they suspend belief when they see something magical happen. Maybe I'm that way with baseball, but it felt like that was a moment where the Philadelphia Phillies' luck finally changed, where things have shifted. What I will warn you, though, here's the one thing that I think about. I think about a week ago, before you played the New York Yankees, you had a game against the Cleveland Guardians where you were in a stretch like this. You were in a slide that you were in. You're already in it. You won 8-0, absolutely just smoked the Guardians. Then you lost 4-3 the next day, got swept by the Yankees, and lost 2 to the Mariners. And that started that 6-game losing streak. So does this mean the Phillies are fully out of it? No, I still think it's a gradual climb out of this type of play. I don't think it just snaps back and all of a sudden they're amazing again. But it feels like for the first time in a long time, that was Philadelphia Phillies baseball. And it feels like an unbelievable, impossible play is what jump-started it. So forgive me if it's hard not to point to something outside the realm of what's observable to say something happened there. Brandon Marsh did play for the Angels, and they are out on the West Coast right now, the Phillies. Is it too far removed from Angels in the Outfield? That great movie? I don't know, man. Weird stuff happens in this sport. Part of the reason why we love it. But it doesn't mean anything. Well, it means something, but it doesn't mean as much if you don't take care of business the rest of the road trip. You got to climb your way out of this. One win's good. A winning streak would be comforting. Winning a couple series, now that would be the sign that the Philadelphia Phillies are really back. And they got a tough one coming up against Shohei Ohtani and the Los Angeles Dodgers this time at their place. The Phils swept them last time. Can we expect something similar out there at Dodger Stadium? It's going to be a tougher task. So we're going to preview that series coming up next and talk about what the expectations are for that series. And later on, we're going to talk about evaluating this road trip as a whole when it's all said and done as we continue Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Liquid IV first, though, because I don't know about y'all. It was nice out this weekend, and I had a long one. I was out on the golf course. I went out for a bar crawl for my friend's 31st birthday. I was around the town of Philadelphia this weekend. And listen, when you have days like that, especially close to or backside of 30, you don't hydrate the way you're supposed to. Well, if only there was like a cheat code, a singular product that you could just pour into a bottle of water and immediately makes you feel like $1,000,000. Well, there is Liquid IV. It's so great, right? You get the little packet, you just open it up, you pour it in the water bottle. It really helps you with hydration. They got a bunch of great flavors. When you're taking in America's pastime, they got a great flavor for that too. I mean, you could try all of them, but listen to this. Popsicle firecracker flavor from Liquid IV. It'll help you hydrate. It tastes great. It's a surefire summer hit. And they've got all the science to back it up. They're powered by LIV Hydroscience and Liquid IV Hydroscience, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients to turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. And you can get 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. Again, that's promo code MLB at liquidiv.com for 20% off your first order. Go ahead and make sure you guys stay hydrated. I'm going to need that because I'm heading to Arizona later this week to watch the Phillies take on the Diamondbacks. So I'm going to step my way out west and get a chance to see a couple of those games. Going to try and make some content out there as well when I'm out at Chase Field in Arizona. But I want to remind you real quick before we move on to this preview of the Dodgers series, and I want to thank you again for checking out Locked On Phillies and making us your first listen today. For your second listen, you should enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully. You know Sully. He's been on the show a couple of times. He's here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs. In dog days of summer, this is the time you start focusing on what's ahead, right? Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single down. Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Phils are heading now down the West Coast to Los Angeles to take on those Dodgers, a very talented baseball team. And yet, the last time you saw LA, well, it was a sweep at Citizens Bank Park where you shut down their big names. Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, nothing really doing for the Dodger stars in that series. And that kind of worries me because you remember I told you about believing in weird things in baseball, like the baseball gods making Brandon Marsh catch that ball even though he couldn't see it and then turning the Phillies season around right on a dime right there. It also kind of tells you there's this whole principle in baseball of being due. And I don't know, man. I could go 0 for 1,000. I'm just not a major league hitter. So that wouldn't make me due, right? It's kind of a flawed principle in and of itself. But Shohei Ohtani in his career has not been very productive against the Philadelphia Phillies. And he was not productive the last time out. And he is too good to be kept down for too long. So forgive me if I'm a little bit afraid of what this series could look like from the top of the order for the Dodgers. But let's look at the pitching matchups to start. And then we'll get into game one a little bit deeper. Tonight in game one, you got Aaron Nola facing off Tyler Glasnow. Great pitching matchup. More on that in a second when we dive into tonight's game. Game two, you're going to see Christopher Sanchez on the mound versus Clayton Kershaw. Kershaw's only thrown 7 innings and change. So he's been hurt a lot of the year, worked his way back, got shelled early on in his work so far this season, a small sample size. You should be able to find a way to win that game. Kershaw's just not been Kershaw anymore. And maybe he will be at some point, but it'll be hard for him to get there this quickly, especially against a lineup like the Phillies, as long as they're starting to hit again. And then you have Tyler Phillips trying to bounce back from a really, really rough game in Seattle. He'll be facing Gavin Stone. And Gavin Stone been very good for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I would expect Tyler Phillips to have some trouble with the stacked Dodgers lineup. I would expect Clayton Kershaw to have some trouble with the stacked Phillies lineup. And that means tonight's a big game because that could be the swing game in the series that determines who wins what. If you believe, like I do, Phils have a great shot in game two and Dodgers have a great shot in game three. Well, tonight, the Dodgers are minus 135 favorites on the money line. They have a 60.8% chance to win, according to ESPN analytics. And that's partially because Tyler Glasnow has been really, really good. Like, his stuff is amazing. He was acquired by the Dodgers and has been solid for them since. He's part of a rotation that has not pitched up to what you'd expect them to, but injuries have been part of that. And just the Dodgers haven't quite hit their stride the way the Phillies had earlier on in the season. So we got to hope they don't hit their stride here. But still, the numbers for Glasnow are unbelievable. He's 8-6, right? With a 3.5 ERA. So you're like, what do you mean unbelievable numbers? 0.96 whip. You have a whip under 1, you're going to be a pretty darn hard pitcher to score against. Also means, remember, we talk about this every once in a while, if you see a high ERA and a low whip, that means you're not giving up a lot of base runners, but you're giving up a good amount of runs. And there's only one way to do that, folks, giving up bombs. If you think Aaron Nola has been giving up a lot of home runs, he has, 19 so far this year in 136 and a third innings. Glasnow hasn't been too far off. In 121 innings pitched, he's given up 14 home runs. He's also given up 7 home runs in his last 10 starts. So, or I guess at least 1 home run in 7 of his last 10 starts. So he's been giving up a good amount of bombs lately. He's gettable that way, but he does have a bunch of strikeouts. He has 155 in 121 innings pitched. So it could be feast or famine for the Phillies. Could be feast or famine for the Dodgers as well, because we know when Nola's on, he strikes out a bunch. 130 so far this year in 136 in the third innings pitched for him. The walks, even at 34 apiece for these guys. So a very similar type of pitchers, both righties, both long hair, both good strikeout guys. Yeah, it'll be a fun little performance to see how they mirror each other and see who takes better advantage of the team they're facing. I don't know if it's going to be one of those like high scoring, hit the ball hard nights. If it's going to be home runs are, like I said, feast or famine, and that's what determines it. And you end up having 1 or 2 big swings that set up the game. But I know that the pitching matchup is going to be a big part of this. And if the Phillies are going to win this game, Aaron Nola is going to have to be good. Not necessarily Zach Wheeler from yesterday good, but we can't have him have one of those 3 bombs in an inning early on, take his team out of it type of performances. So the first thing I'm looking at is Aaron Nola. The next thing I'm looking at is how the Philadelphia Phillies offense continues what they did in the 8th inning on Sunday. I'm not even like we know who's on the Dodgers. Shohei Ohtani leads them in all 3 major categories here offensively. If he was able to pitch, he would be leading them in probably like everything pitching wise. Like he's a monster. He's a modern day legend, and he's only getting better. But you look at a couple of the names on the injured list, and now this gets a little bit interesting. Freddie Freeman is on the injured list now, retroactive to August 5th. He is out, so you don't have to worry about him as much. Not that he gave you trouble in the last time you saw the Los Angeles Dodgers, but no, so he's not back. I don't really know how you put together as scary of a lineup without Freddie Freeman. He kind of gets lost in the shuffle among Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts and that 3-headed monster that they have out there in LA. But there's a chance that he may be the guy that's the most proven hitter of all of them. I don't know. He's been around for a long time. He's been consistently good. He works counts really, really well. I know Shohei Ohtani can walk as well, but he's more dangerous when he's swinging. Freddie Freeman is dangerous whether he swings or not. So that's a big miss for the Dodgers. The Phillies, for all their faults, they're healthy. They got all their big guys. So maybe we'll be looking at a situation where you do see the top of the order look a little bit more barren than it normally does for the Dodgers. But offensively for the Phillies, I mean to say, those big guys have to continue to produce. Schwarber's got to keep being big. Bryce Harper can't have that 3-hit day and then just go back to an 0 for his next 11 type of stretch. Trey Turner still needs to pull out of this weird stretch he's in as well. Maybe yesterday we'll take a little bit of pressure off him and say, well, if Harp's going to get hot and Schwarber's going to hit in front of me, well, now they're more worried about them than me, and I can work my way out of this slump. And then you just need like 1 or 2 guys from the bottom of the order, whether it's Marsh, whether it's Stott, whether it's Castellanos. And these are names of guys that can be major contributors. You just need a good game out of one of those guys. Everything else you get is bonus. Like all those middle of the order guys that could be great or could have off days, Real Muto, like Bohm, those guys you don't even totally need. That's how deep this lineup is. Like they can still be a good baseball team. But I'm looking at the top of the order guys, Harper, Schwarber, Turner. That's how you win, right? It's no secret. We'll have to see if they do it tonight. You got a righty on the mound. Good for Schwarber, good for Harper. Let's see if they can build momentum now. That's the one thing that they've been missing. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit more about this West Coast trip, but a little bit further into the evaluating the trip as a whole type of thing, because I got into a conversation on the radio this morning that I want to tell you about and why I am not too worried about the result of this series with the Dodgers. You might be like, what are you talking about? I'll explain in a second as we continue Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about our friends over at Prize Picks first, because they're the absolute best. They're America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Over 5 million active members. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. You're not playing against any other users. You just have to get your picks right. That's all that matters. You're not compared to anyone else. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And you got some stars in this one. Ohtani, Harper, Real Muto, Schwarber, Turner, like Nola and Glasnow on the mound. How much more star-studded action could you possibly see? So, do you think it's going to be a high-scoring game? Well, then you can pick over on a bunch of guys' hits. Super simple, right? I put 30 seconds of thought process into that. That's about how long it takes to set a lineup on Prize Picks. And you can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. It's easy. Turn $10 into $1,000. Simple, right? You know what's even better? They're going to cut you a deal. You download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You'll get a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. With Prize Picks, it's that easy. All right. So the conversation that I had on air this morning over at 97.5 The Fanatic was co-hosting with my guy Andrew Salchunas, and he brought up how he needs the Phillies to take 2 or 3 from the Dodgers. I said, whoa, slow your roll here. This team has got 2 wins in the past, 8 games? And now you're telling me you're expecting them to take 2 of 3 from the Dodgers, the second best team in the National League by record, an immensely talented team that a lot of people had as a World Series favorite going into this season. Like, doesn't that feel like a pretty hefty jump from where we just were 2 days ago to where we are now? Like, does one win change all that? And his explanation was, You're the better team by record. I believe you're the better team than the Dodgers. You should go out and win more games than they win. And I mean, I understand the logic, but again, I like gradual growth back. I'm not expecting them to just snap out of this because they had a magical catch yesterday and a good 8th inning. Frankly, outside of Kyle Schwarber's leadoff homer in the first, and I don't know if I'd consider that like a good inning, one good swing, you were looking at 8 of the 9 innings not being that productive. I don't know that that's enough to pull them out of this. Like, I hope so, but I do think it's going to be a gradual. Like, you go from winning 1 of 3 against the Mariners to playing the Dodgers tight and maybe winning 1, maybe winning 2. Like, do I think they can win the series? Absolutely. Do I think that I need them to? Like, if they don't, I'm going to lose my mind. No, I can't do that at this point. Little victories, folks, to pull us out of the hole. Well, not that the Phillies are in a hole, but to pull us out of this rough stretch that the Phillies are in. But here's also why. Because when you look at a team that's slumping and you get caught up in the day-to-day, it's hard to evaluate when the team's pulling out of it. It may feel more surprising when you do look back and realize, oh, they actually haven't been playing that bad lately. And I'm not saying that they have been playing that bad lately. I'm saying when we get to a point when the Philadelphia Phillies are playing better baseball, it may be like, man, I didn't even notice them starting to pull out of it, and all of a sudden they're back. But the way that I handle that is I expand the sample size a little bit. I don't look at series right now. I look at trips. I look at portions of the schedule. And it just so happens that the Phillies are on a 10-game West Coast road trip. They have these 3 in LA, then they have 4 in Arizona against the Diamondbacks. And going into this West Coast road trip, I would have been totally fine with 500 ball. Go out there, win 5, lose 5, come back, no harm, losing no more ground in your race to stay above 500 and above the Atlanta Braves and above the Los Angeles Dodgers. And you're looking at a situation where that's totally acceptable to me, especially considering how the Philadelphia Phillies have played lately. Like, that would be a win. Now, if you only win 1 game in LA against the Dodgers, you need to win 3 of 4 against the Diamondbacks. I think winning that series is much more doable than winning this series against LA, especially when they feel like they owe you one after the sweep that you gave them at Citizens Bank Park. But the other thing that is important to note is the Dodgers right now are a game back of the Phillies for the best record in the National League. So whoever wins this series is going to be, when the series is said and done, the number 1 team in the National League by record. If the Dodgers win 2 or 3, they'll catch the Phillies. If the Phillies win 2 or 3, they'll stay ahead of the Dodgers. And there is a lot on the line there. Remember, it is still early August, only August 5th at this point. So it's not like this is the final days of a race for the top seed. I still wouldn't want to see them relinquish the top spot in the National League. So I'm not saying the series doesn't matter. I'm not saying they can't win 2 out of 3, but I'm saying that I like to, again, expand the sample size when this team isn't playing well so that I can give them a little bit more leeway to get out of it. And judging whether or not they're back by 3 games against a top 4 or 5 team in baseball in the Dodgers is not something that's going to keep you sane. We've got enough stacked up against the Phillies right now. I don't need people to start making expectations higher than what I think they should be. And that's just my personal point of view. Listen, if you want to get mad at them if they don't win the series against the Dodgers, that's totally your decision. I will not be doing that because I believe they can still make it out of this road trip 500, and that would be good enough for me based on where they've been at. And guess what happens? If they go out there and beat the Dodgers, win 2 out of 3, hey, could you imagine if they come out and swept the Dodgers again, this time at their place? Like, how good would we feel? It's not that the Phillies are in a good spot right now, but when you keep the expectations realistic based on how the team's been performing, you find yourself a little bit more, I don't know, even keel, I guess it would be, when it comes to following a baseball team. And that's a virtue in a 162-game regular season. So I guess ultimately, to recap the episode, baseball gods are real. They might have just saved the Phillies in this stretch, but we'll have to see if they can build momentum off of what happened yesterday with some magical moments. The Dodgers series, 1 out of 3 ain't bad. 2 out of 3 would be exceptional. I'm not really thinking a sweep one. Well, normally I would say I'm not thinking a sweep one way or another, but I do worry about the Phillies' ability to continue to play good baseball because they just have been on the verge of a sweep for what feels like the last 6 or 7 series now. And also see this as more of a road trip than just a road series, right? Look at all 10 of the games rather than just focusing on 1 3-game stretch and missing out on some other good things that the Phillies did. That's it. Simple, right? Baseball's an easy game, especially when the gods are on your side. That's all for today's episode. Thank you again for checking us out. One more time, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribe to the YouTube, all that great stuff. It really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. It gets you new notifications when episodes are posted. Costs you no money. It's free, easy. Come on. Help a brother out, would you? That's all for today's episode again. So I will talk to you tomorrow, hopefully recapping. Could you imagine if they win two in a row? How great would that be? Oh, we can dream, right? Talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.